I will. Awesome. Thank you. So, listen, just a quick overview of Chad Gunnelson. He serves as the track and field and cross country coach at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. Previously, he served on the D3 Track and Field Executive Committee for U.S. Track and Field and Cross Country Coaches Association. And he was also at University of Dubuque as the head track and field coach. He also holds a master's and a bachelor's and two master's degrees from University of Dubuque. So he's also a husband and father, very busy, very accomplished. And Chad, thank you for being here. And please take it away.
You bet. Thank you, Landon. Just so all you know, when I saw the opportunity to do this, I was really excited. And then all of a sudden I realized I had to fit this into 15 minutes and I was really freaking out. And so I told Landon that we're going to do this like our podcast. We're going to do this 2.0 speed to try and get through everything we can, just because plyometrics are such a robust topic. And I've tried to keep it as short and sweet as possible, but hit the big rocks so that we can talk about things in the Q&A at the end. And so I'm just going to go ahead and pop up my presentation, if you guys don't mind. So as Landon mentioned, I'm at Augustana College now. I've been coaching, just to kind of give you a little bit of background. I've been coaching for going into my 22nd year. So I've been coaching for 21 years. But part of that, I was a owner of a sports performance training franchise called Athletic Republic. So did that for 5 years while I was coaching high school track and field and high school football. And I would say that, I played college football, but I did track in high school, and just kind of gravitated my way towards coaching. I found out that even though owning a business, love sports performance, coaching is really what I was called to do. And it's something that I needed to kind of follow. And that's what led me to the University of Dubuque. And since then, I've had a chance to write training and programming and be involved in different sports in the campuses I've been on, and do some consulting. And I also get a chance to work with youth athletes and a couple post-collegiate athletes that have had a chance to compete at some high levels. And so, but plyometrics, I mainly oversee sprints, jumps, and hurdles. So the elastic strength, stretch shortening cycle, the concept of kind of building a robust, resilient athlete who is explosive and fast is really kind of the name of the game for what we do. And so it's certainly been a journey, and there's been some folks along the way that have really helped kind of lead and guide my thoughts on this, and some folks that I hope you can look up. But yeah, so that's just a little bit, I guess, of my background. And but I am certified CSCS from NSCA, FMS certified, USA weightlifting, and then Titleist Performance Institute, and a few other things, right? But I would say that those things had very little impact on kind of the way that I look to write programming and implement programming and work with athletes than some of the folks who have really been mentors or influencers for me. And so I wanted to kind of show you who those folks are, because if you want to take some time to dive into like really a wealth of knowledge in the ability to program, train, especially in the world of speed and power, these are a couple folks to look at. So Boo Schecksnyder was at LSU the majority of his career. He is now retired, but he runs all of the education programming for USTF-CCCA, including a strength conditioning certification with them. But most recently, he was the strength coach for LSU track and field, but was a jumps coach. He was the USA jumps coach. And as a close mentor and friend of mine, he's somebody who's really helped kind of shape the programming and what I do. That old article there, John Forpier started Forpier Acceleration Sports Network, which became Athletic Republic. And so John has now passed, but John went over to the Soviet Union, learned Soviet training methods during the Goodwill Games, and really dove into the science and nature of Eastern Bloc training methods. And he brought that into the franchise. And so all the programming that we implemented at Athletic Republic was really written from years of research that John implemented. He worked with the Cincinnati Bengals for a significant amount of time. And so he was a big influence on the way in which I program as well. And then Cal Dietz, as we're working around the clock there, Cal wrote the book Triphasic Training, or is kind of created the triphasic training model. That's an really a topic and or a book, an area that I strongly suggest you dive into because it really takes the concept of plyometrics or the stretch shortening cycle into the weight room. And the work that he's done at Minnesota with the hockey team and other sports, he's a significant driver of some pretty neat ideas about programming. And then Dan Paff, Dan also has a background in track and field, but is also a consultant now. He's retired from coaching, but the Rudiment series, you'll see a lot of people doing. Dan was kind of the creator of that Rudiment series and kind of his progression to bounding through that. And so he's someone that has, also kind of shaped what I do. And then the two at the bottom there, I'd be remiss to not mention those two. Kelvin Giles is out of Australia, and he works primarily with rugby, but he's done a ton of work with the development of youth and mainly in the sport of rugby. But the things that he does are incredible. And obviously, we should all know the High-Powered Plyometrics book by Jim Radcliffe, right? Jim Radcliffe is kind of the first person, I think, to really put these things on paper and give coaches a way to kind of create and program plyometrics. And so Jim is another one to really mention there. And so with these guys, these are some things that may stick out, you may know, but are different. So up in the corner there, the inverted funnel principle is what John talked about. Obviously, if an athlete can move underneath their hips, that's one thing, but trying to really expand that funnel and teaching an athlete to move farther outside their hips, that's how we improve their ability to change direction, create kind of more resilient, lower half in terms of injury risk reduction. And so that's a concept that really has kind of changed my thinking around plyometrics. But now in track and field, we don't really have to spend too much time working outside of the sagittal plane, but it's something over like with outside of track and field and agility sports that we do. Obviously, the triphasic model there, I mean, the stretch shortening cycle is a concept of trying to shorten that amount of time, reduce ground contact time is crucial. And so again, what's the block kind of periodization and the programming in which Cal has done, it's very advanced and for high level athletes, but something we've been able to really try and modify and adapt to our athletes and in our setting, and we've had some good results from it. There's Dan's rudiment hop series. I mean, you can see that all over the place. A lot of people are implementing rudiment hops and really a way to kind of tendon train and develop and grow into a good bounder. And then really for Boo, that's kind of one of the whiteboards that throw everything. That's an 8-foot whiteboard up there and just some programming, but thoughtful programming is really what Boo has given me as a way to kind of build an annual plan and create some macrocycles and mesocycles that really make sense. And so, so let's dive into it. Really the purpose of plyometrics, are really, in my opinion, two things, or two concepts. One, you want to create a robust, resilient performer with the enhanced ability across all ranges of movements and velocities, right? Like we want to see athletes who can stay healthy, can stay consistent, and are in a position where their tissues can handle the demands of the sport. And plyometrics are the greatest way to take care of that. And then really to improve speed and power, which is by reducing coupling and ground contact time, and so if coupling time shorten, we move faster, we spend less time on the ground, we move faster. And so really like the basis and kind of foundation of plyometrics should revolve around the force velocity curve and the stretch shortening cycle. And so that's really, to me, the purpose of implementing them, why, how, when, and it doesn't matter if you are a lower tier distance runner, if you are a lineman in football, and even if you are a youth athlete, or if you are an aging adult involved in rec league softball, some way in which to implement plyometrics are going to be extremely beneficial for long-term health if done properly. So as we talk about the force velocity curve, imagine many of us have seen this, right? We've all kind of seen the nature of where different things fit on the force velocity curve. Obviously, the more weight you have, the slower you move. And so max strength fits on kind of the low velocity, high force end, and then all the way down to speed, call it maybe sprinting, right? Would be on the high velocity end and low force. And as you see, that's kind of the concentric side of the curve. When you go to the other side of the curve, you're looking at those two things as well. And so really trying to develop isometric strength and eccentric strength. And that's really what I think Cal Dietz dove in, what he created with the concepts of triphasic training, dove into the ideas of isometric and eccentric strength. These things were not, it's not that these things were not known or not out there, but I think they've become a lot more prevalent and understood, and are ways in which we can train and develop athletes to gain greater performance. So here's just some different activities, obviously, that kind of fit or match these spaces on the curve. So our static lifts, right? Our main lifts, our squat, our bench, our deadlift. Olympic lifts, we move a little faster. Weighted jumps, we move a little faster than that. Box jumps, a little faster than that. All the way on down to rudiment hops, jump roping, skipping, things like that. And so I've heard the terms extensive plyos and intensive plyos, right? Folks use those terms, and the best way to categorize plyometric activities came from John Verpeer. And with the plyometric programs that we implemented at Athletic Republic, he came up with these kind of three categories: rapid response, short response, and long response. And to me, that made the most sense. And so that's when I think about what we need to do to make sure that we're getting a good profile of plyometric activity, that we're trying to train at different velocities and put athletes in situations to kind of mimic sport with a good foundation. We look at rapid response, short response, and long response. So when we think about plyos, or multi-jump training is what we call it. We don't really use the term plyos, but multi-jump or jump training. These are kind of those three categories. Rapid response is going to be the shortest ground contact time. So rudiment hops, agility ladders. Agility ladders do not improve agility. They are simply a basic plyo activity. So dot drills, jump rope. So those things that basically you're moving back and forth in less than a split second. So quick ground-based contacts and are typically repetitive or done as fast as possible, or done to kind of create good contacts. That's what rapid response would be. Short response, that's when you're going to get into your hops or hurdle hops, low hurdle hops, wicket hops, pogos, box jumps, the things that are going to have a little bit longer response, but are going to still be relatively quick in nature. And then we get into long response, and that's when we're getting into our more intense activities like bounding, depth jumps, weighted jumps. So this is basically the three categories that I think about when I try and decide what we need to program for an athlete to create a good profile of plyometrics. And obviously everything in between. I mean, when you look at activities and you think about what they need for their sport, you got to think about what matches that in particular, but you also got to make sure you're kind of working both ends to the middle, or kind of finding both ends and working your way to the specific nature of that as you work through training and over the season. So when we talk about programming and progression, programming has really been kind of a lifelong journey for me. I don't think there's a way in which I can tell you exactly what to program. Hearing kind of in the networking earlier, we've got folks who are in sports medicine. We have folks who are in high school strength conditioning. We have folks who are in coaching. And so really, like, there's a lot of factors that are going to go into that. But when we talk about programming progression, I want to give you some ideas, and then we can work to questions about it a little bit later. But when you think about programming plyometrics, having the end in mind and then working back, I think, is the best way to program anything, whether it comes down to endurance or aerobic development or plyometrics. So you really want to think about where the athlete needs to be, what the demands are at the championship phase of the season, and what's the best way to, and where then work your way back, finding the best place to start to be able to progress to that point. So you got to meet the athlete where they are. We can't start them too high because we'll get injured. And if we start them too low, we're going to leave results on the table. And neither of those things should be an option for a coach. We need to find out where they are, which comes down to either testing or intake, or just using the coach's eye to really truly dive in to find out where your athlete is. And we need to have like requisite sport performance outputs, right? Like, what are the KPIs? So we need to think about, what does the athlete need to do to be able to be a varsity tier soccer player at their high school? And to do that, like, what are the requisite levels of performance needed? And we need to find a way to get them there in the proper amount of time. And then we need to create a foundation to grow. So if we miss or skip steps when we're doing plyometrics, we're not going to be able to advance to places we want to go. And so that's where that kind of inverted funnel, right? We've got to start small with that funnel, and then we've got to expand it. And so we've got to build a good foundation first. Now, plyos are a neural activity. And so I personally think neural activity should be paired with neural training components, right? So distance running would be kind of the greatest example in my world. And pretty much like distance runners don't typically do anything neural in their development, right? Yes, some distance runners may do some fly 40s. They may do what we call speed development, but most distance coaches call a speed day repeat 400s. Well, there's no speed involved in that. And so plyos need to be a part of their development. And so putting those things on the day in which they're best matched with, best paired with. So that would be workout days or the fastest pace days. And the same thing goes for in season for any team-based sport or even for personal training clients. Finding a way to match the right things on the right days is going to be very helpful. And so acceleration training, speed development, right? Like anaerobic efforts or the heavy lifting days, like those are the days that are going to match best with plyometrics. And so making sure that you're maximizing the benefit of development in that nature, and the neural nature is doing those things together and not confusing the body, but giving the body an opportunity to develop from a neurological standpoint all together, and then maximizing rest in between. And then we want to try and align what we do in programming for plyometrics with the other characteristics of the session, right? So when we do an acceleration day, so if you're working on acceleration or starts with your athletes in sport, those are horizontal movements. Like we're trying to overcome inertia and develop horizontal power, horizontal force output. And so and there's big amplitudes of movement, big ranges of motion. And so matching the plyos on that day after your acceleration development with what they did in the training session or in the earlier components of the training session is the best way to match that. Okay. And then for speed, right? Speed is much more vertical in nature and the ground contact times are much shorter. And so when you think about rapid response or long response, trying to match those or couple those with the best kind of training day that aligns with what they are in nature. And then power strength, obviously, those days, you can blend things, superset, contrast. We do a lot of like French contrast oriented pairings with what we do, and treating plyometrics as an integral part of the workout as opposed to its own separate thing at the end of the session is also a way in which you can consider programming plyometrics. So again, like just so many things to think about. I mean, that's right there, 23 weeks of training just kind of thrown on a board, and you can kind of see the old school volume up, intensity down, and it flips all the way through the middle of the year. And we try and find our way to get to June in a good space and good place to be healthy in our absolute fastest possible. And so, but when we think about progression, the most important terms are just to go simple to complex, right? Meet the athlete where they are, and then build something from there, basic to advanced in terms of the drills and activities you're doing, and then general to specific. So we want to get as specific to the sport as possible as we get closer to and get to taper time. And so we want to be ready to do the things needed to compete well before championship phase of any season. So a couple of things to think about: modes of support, right? Going from double leg to single leg. Ranges of motion, small amplitudes to large amplitudes, planes of motion, moving in a linear fashion, the sagittal plane, or moving laterally, moving at an angle, right? Moving at angles or in ranges of motion and planes of motion that match the sport. Those are all things to think about as we program our plyometric activities. And then tendon training. The concept of tendon training is simply very basic plyometrics to prepare the body to handle the load. So putting the body in a position, both the connective tissues and the soft tissues, to be ready to take on the season. And so a lot of preseason activities, off-season activities will include this. And so we need to kind of think about how those initial plyometric activities are and training programs are written to kind of train the tendons and get athletes ready. In-season programming, right? Like we have to now balance and think about what the sport demand is, and if the plyometric activities will add too much to that. And so that's one thing with the amount of running that we do in track and field, or the amount of work or effort that a coach may have an athlete do on the basketball court, or just the nature of the sport of basketball, right? We need to think about is anything too much? What may be too much on top of all the other activities they're doing? So how does in-season programming look? And then really, how do we taper and transition? How do we put ourselves in a position to peak at the right time? I don't believe in a peak, and I think science would agree, but uh, the arousal comes from the nature of the competition, but the athlete needs to be their freshest and healthiest and most prepared at that time of the year. And so how do we taper our plyo training towards that, whether we're tapering into season or we're tapering into the end of season and championship phase? And then transitioning. So progression, I am a firm believer in Matveyev's model and programming in 3 to 4 week blocks. So whatever the theme or kind of really the modality that we're using or the theme of training or really the emphasis that we want to improve is going to be a focus for 3 to 4 weeks. And then we're going to change or modify the plan. And so when you look at this model, I mean, this is basically kind of what is going to happen to the body over those 3 to 4 weeks. So, right, we start a new program, we start a new mesocycle, we apply that stimulus. The athlete's going to be sore. When they get sore, right, there's fatigue, performance drops. As we improve, not only do we add recovery, but we also adapt and grow. The athlete becomes better at what they do, and then we want to see that super compensation, right? We want to see them improve or be able to apply more force in less time over time. And then after those 3 to 4 weeks, then we're going to switch to some different programming or a different mode of support or a different focus in that next cycle. And so this is really kind of the foundation of how I write training, is considering Matveyev's model. Now, considerations. Training age is crucial. We need to think about that. So depending on the athlete you're working with, it may not just be like a senior in high school. It could be their first time coming out for a sport. And if you've also got other seniors who have been in your weight room since 8th grade, those two are not the same age. And so we need to think about training age when we program plyometrics. Athlete readiness, very similar concept, but this is the athlete ready? You know, you may have an elite athlete of yours that comes back after doing nothing over the summer, and they may not be ready to dive into an intense plyometric plan in the fall before they get ready for basketball season. So we really need to think about the athlete readiness, and we need to probably test for it and be certain where we're at. The floor and surface, you know, I know when it comes to plyos and it comes to the world of strength conditioning, I mean, we may be on a rubber floor, we may be on a tile floor, we may be in a hallway, we may be on carpet, we may be out on grass, we may be on a hill. And so we really need to think about the floor and surface. And I know folks have done everything from rolling out old wrestling mats, right? And finding a way to do plyometrics and get some really good shock attenuation with some old mats and find ways to kind of reduce the impact and put the athlete in a position to do the work and stay healthy. And so those are some things you got to think about. Like, what is your surface or what is your floor that you're working on? And that's going to change how you program. If you're on a hard tile surface in a school hallway, you're likely not going to be able to do the same volume, and you're not going to be able to do the same volume as someone who has a really nice kind of floor, shock attenuation floor. And you look at Kyle over there on the left, like he is on a 8-inch high plyometric floor. It was built intentionally with a specific level of shock attenuation for people to do plyos on. We don't have that in a high school hallway. And so we need to think about those things. What did they do the previous day? If we're not considering, because a lot of times in strength conditioning, right, we get them for 2 days a week. We get them for 1 day a week, and we don't always know what the coach is going to do with them. And we don't always know what they're going to do. And so if they all of a sudden got punished for an hour after practice and they come to us the next day and we've got this awesome plyometric program ready to do all this multi-jumping and they are just fried, we got to change the plan. What are the activities prior to or after what they're doing? So considering recovery time, right? Like how many days are we putting in between their sessions? And then the ACL rupture risk. So post-adolescent females are 3 to 5 times more likely of ACL tears. And we need to make sure, if we are strength conditioning professionals or sport coaches and we coach females, we need to be conscious of the valgus knee tendency of the women on our team. And if they are in a position or at ACL risk, we need to be very thoughtful of what their activities are going to be and how we're going to progress them. And so those are some big things when we talk about safety progression programming that I would want you to consider as you put together your planning and coach your athletes. And so, yeah, but with that, I don't know if I got through 15 minutes or maybe it's probably 20 or whatever, but I tried, Landon. But now questions. So what do we got? Let's fire away.
Yeah, please just come off of mute and jump in. I'm curious, Chad, if I can jump in first.
Yep.
Tell me about assessments that you do.
So we do kind of the old school LSU pentathlon. I mean, we don't do a kind of more of like a risk assessment or health assessment. We do all of ours as more of a like a pentathlon. So we do broad jump 30, fly 10, uh, standing triple jump, overhead back throw. We do those things and we treat those as KPIs, right? We know that if our overhead back improves, then we're likely going to be able to, our total body power is going to improve and we'll be better out of blocks. If our 30 improves, right, we'd hope our 100-meter dash improves. And so those are kind of the main components. And we can also measure those year to year. We can measure those cycle to cycle. We can measure those season to season. And all of them are safe to do at any time of the year. So when it's things that we test, we want to test things that we can test at any time, regardless of readiness, that are going to give us measurements that matter. And we can use that data to drive training or to evaluate training as coaches. And so, but in terms of assessment, like I want to kind of go back to the ACL concept. So a single leg box squat or a single leg kind of step down for females to really check if they're greater than 10% on that valgus knee tendency is going to be crucial. And yes, I know coaches are not physical therapists. They're not orthopedic doctors. They may not understand what that means, but just taking the time to dive in and look at what valgus knee tendencies look like that would be at risk or not at risk, doing some land and load teaching and seeing where we may have concerns there. Those athletes then can be put into some ACL bridge protocol and put into some glute strengthening and activities that are going to really help accelerate their way of getting back into a stable position and kind of handling the demands of the training, but also more importantly, the demands of their sport and hopefully working through their career without injury. And so that would be the big one that we did. Every female athlete we trained at Athletic Republic did a ACL risk assessment on the front end of training. And then if they were greater than 10% or even close on their valgus knee tendency, we put them into our ACL bridge protocol and we work through a more intense kind of glute core development and knee stability programming for them. So those are some things that we do.
Chad, when we talk about like your programming periodization progressions throughout the year for your plyometrics, are you taking more of a specificity approach throughout your phases, or are your long, rapid, short plyometrics always present concurrently in the same phase or whatever, and then you are progressing from simple to complex throughout that
Yep.
concurrent phase?
Great question. So each one is always present. Like we are trying to touch everything on the force velocity curve all the time, but the emphasis on what part of that and how we touch it when is really what changes throughout the year. And so we are going to be relatively even in terms of kind of, we're going to do Olympic lifts. We're going to do box jumps. We're going to do rudiment series and low level ground based plyometrics. We're going to do some basic hurdle hops or lateral bounding. We're going to do all of those things, throughout the year. But as we progress, we go from double leg to single leg. We go from baby bounds to bounds for max distance. We go from skip for height, like we go for like skips to power skips, or the box progresses on a depth jump, right? So we typically don't ever want we want to try and get a little bit above the vertical jump height of the athlete in depth jumps. And so if an athlete has a 28-inch vertical, we don't want to start with a 30-inch box for depth jumps. And so we would try and progress up so we can get to 2 to 4 inches above what their actual vertical jump height is, because that's how we're going to improve their vertical. And so, but kind of directly to answer your question, like as we get closer to the end of season, the percentage of multi-jumps that we do is less. So multi-jumps will be a much larger component of training early in the year because we're not doing as many specific things. And so it's a bigger component of what we do, because I think the elastic strength component is a significant injury risk reducer and a significantly like a profound base creator in terms of a power athlete. And so, but as we go and the demands of the sport gets higher, we have meets every week or games every week. The more that we're doing in terms of the intense activities of the sport later in the year, that means the intensity of those peripheral training activities like plyos has to be reduced. And so, plyos will be like a third of what we do in the fall, but they're going to be maybe 5 to 10% of what we do in championship phase. And so, but we're programming those things with each neural day. So we're going to do a lot of horizontal bounding, a lot of horizontal jumping or rudiment work on days in which we do starts or acceleration. We're going to do a lot of pogo jumps and box jumps and hurdle hops and things on days when we train speed. And then on like speed endurance days, we don't necessarily do plyos. It kind of depends on where that fits in the week and what we've done the day before, what we have planned the next day. But there's always going to be a multi-jump component every day, but it's going to change kind of, as you mentioned, from that basic to complex or, and so we're going to get into more single leg, more advanced, high intense activities, but the amount of reps of those activities are going to diminish greatly as we get closer to championship phase.
Thank you. That's awesome.
You bet.
All right, Coach Gunny, this is kind of a broad question, but in your years, what would you think I had to say this, like working together with, a team? You've got your sports medicine staff, you got your athletic trainer, you might have physical therapists, you have your strength and conditioning coach, you've got you. Track is really unique in the fact that like a lot of track workouts kind of look like strength and conditioning workouts potentially. And there's all these loads where it's like football practice is football practice, and then weightlifting is different. So track, there's a lot of it blends over into all three fields. It's really hard to know what's rehab versus what's strength conditioning, what's practice.
Yeah.
Working with those three different teams or those three different individuals or groups or whatever, what's been your favorite method? What's been the most efficient? What do you wish you had with your group? Or just, I don't know what I'm saying, but hopefully you get my picture of.
No, absolutely. So one, like we are very fortunate. We have a spectacular athletic trainer that works with cross country, indoor track, and outdoor track. So we haven't always had the same person in terms of sports medicine that has that continuity of care, right? And so that's created some challenges, but we have that person at Augie. And so communication is the single most important thing. And I know when you're dealing with coaches or dealing with strength coaches that there is always going to be an ego at play. And it's challenging sometimes to even have the conversation to find out where someone's at or what they need or what needs to be worked on. But communication has been so crucial. I've been fortunate in several places that I've worked to have really, really great sports medicine staff. And the biggest thing is like, I love when an athletic trainer is doing things with the athletes to kind of develop progression back to the sport that actually are the things that we do in practice, right? And so we'll have athletes that'll come to me, and our athletic trainer gets our training plan at the beginning of the week every week. So no matter what type of athlete they have in their room, they know exactly what that person's going to be doing that day. So that way they can either provide care to prepare them for that, or they can advise on how to modify or adapt that day's plan. And so, but if we have multi-jump, we have plyos programmed that day, and we've got an athlete who's got shin splints, or we've got an athlete returning back from an ankle sprain or something like that. Like having the athletic trainer take the things which are already programmed in that day and like putting them into a situation where they're modified based on their expertise or the level in which that athlete can do those. And then kind of reporting back and saying, hey, we had a chance to work through all of the multi-jump today and there were no issues. Or we had a chance to work through multi-jump, and because of the ankle, all the bilateral stuff worked great, but like still not ready to do single leg hops on that bad ankle. But a week away. And so those are the conversations, or those are kind of the ways in which things have worked out really well for us. And so I personally think, you've got to have you have to have an understanding of what the coach is doing and why. The coach has to have an understanding of like your kind of philosophy on care or return to play programming, like what you look to do. And then you have to work together every single day. And sometimes we have to be reminded that, hey, we are all in this to make sure that this individual is at their highest level of performance at the most important time. And so let's team up, let's partner on this. Let's be a team, and let's create the best opportunity to make that happen. And so, but also the athlete sometimes is not the best cog in that whole thing, right? And so the athlete has to be open and be the owner of those things, And so, like, I'll tell athletes, like, I don't only want to hear from our AT what you're doing or where you're at. I want you to share with me where you feel you're at, what Jay spoke with you on, and where you think we can go from, And so making sure that all kind of parties of that triad, right, the performance triad, and the coach, the athlete, and the trainer are all kind of taking ownership of their roles and working together. And so it can be interesting, I'm going to say this on the room because, like, I know it's a lot of strength coaches in here, and so this I may lose some friends on this one, but I've had the conversation talking with strength coaches where it's like, hey, can we consider maybe adjusting this or adjusting that? And, I'll get the strength coach come to me and say, hey, like, I don't tell you how to coach track, so don't tell me how to coach in the weight room. And I said, well, if they don't do well in track, you don't lose your job. I do.
Yeah.
So, we're going to work together on this, and we're going to find a way to make sure that they're in the best position to compete. And so there's always those unfortunate situations. And so, I don't know if you were on earlier, but Landon is working with our head strength coach at Augustana. Fit is kind of, we're bringing Fit into Augie, and Jeff is just great to work with, and so, like, he understands that concept. And so just trying to find a way to build a relationship on the front end and to repair it as needed with everyone involved is really going to be the best way to work your way through that. So, but it's hard. That's the hardest thing.
No,
So,
no, for sure. Appreciate it. I love that idea of you sending out your training programs and sharing it with the medical staff, maybe the strength and conditioning coaches, I'm sure, just so everyone's on the same page of knowing what you're doing. That would go a long way. So that's awesome.
I think it's hard for you to do your job if you don't know what's going on. And so
Amen.
I think that's the bare minimum that a coach should be able to do, is inform those involved with what's going on. And that just requires a little bit of front end work, proactivity, and communication. And I think it's better for the coach that way too. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Who else? We got a lot of people with no cameras and no voices. What is going on here? It's good to see lots of names, but well,
Chad, one more for you, if you don't
you
mind.
bet.
What would you, so for example, I'm looking at Servando here on the call, and Servando, how many athletes and teams do you have?
So I have a unique setup. I have a total of like 400 plus athletes. My strength sessions are built into the school day. So we have 5 periods every day. So I see my athletes, or everyone it's enrolled in my class in that trimester. I see them 5 days a week. So incredible. I get to program and structure a week by week basis, however I want it. That's amazing. Within those classes, I have a mixture between freshmen through seniors, single sport athletes through 3-sport athletes. I even have some non-athletes that are in there, which small percentage, but so it's a very dynamic and a class with a lot of variety. And but to answer your question, roughly 400 to 50 athletes.
That's a huge responsibility. And Chad, I was just curious, in a situation like Servando is in, are there is it a one size fits all for plyometrics to apply across different populations and different team sports, or are there a few different exercises or plyometrics that you could say, yeah, this is something that you ought to do across the board, and then customize underneath that?
There's some big challenges when you work with large groups. And you have to, one, I think, out of just feasibility reality, you have to find a, kind of a good midpoint on where to place kind of majority of the group's training, but you have to let the top athletes grow. And you also have to make sure that you're not kind of pulling people up too fast. And so I'm going to pull back to another slide. So like this depth jump progression. Now I've had 53, as much as 53 track and field athletes, like directly under my like event specific coaching over my time. That was the most we had in 1 year. And so I put this together for a coaches clinic at the high school level, because I know a lot of high school coaches are, have large teams, large groups, and they're coaching a lot of events. And so I built this to try and progress up to an advanced level kind of vertical jump program, right? And so if we're going over boxes, we start the men at 18, because likely it's going to be tendon training for your biggest jumpers, and it's going to be, a good kind of challenging start for your lower jumpers. And then the same thing for women, starting them on a 12-inch box, you're stepping off the box, jumping up onto the next box. And so doing depth jumps that way and building up to where you want your athletes to be. I mean, if you have a good amount of boys on your high school team that have verts over 30 inches, you're going to be pretty good. If you have girls over 24 inches, you're going to be really good. And so this is just kind of an example of a way in which you can take the contacts and grow them. And then, because you notice like the contacts actually go up with time as we're kind of building some resiliency, and then go back down starting on week 4 as the intensity grows. And so this was just kind of a simple example. But one thing that I think helps a lot, if you're doing activities that are plyometric in nature, say any type of ground-based footwork, do it by time, because your best athletes will do more in that time. They will get the benefit. So if Landon and I are doing an activity for 10 seconds as fast as we possibly can, Landon might get 30 reps in those 10 seconds. I might get 15 reps in those 10 seconds, but we're both doing it at our own max effort. And so Landon, who is better prepared and more fit, is getting a higher volume in that same amount of time than I am. And so time is a good way to kind of build activities in, because then it allows athletes to kind of fit into that time where they are. And then also like the big thing to think about, like watching people who bound well and move well in plyometrics, to me is like the poetry of our jobs. And the tough thing is your best bounders, your best athletes are the ones who need to do less. And so because they are putting so much more force into the ground. And so that's one thing to think about, is if you've got your best athlete who knows how to do every one of these activities, and you're having them demo every activity, and then you're having them do all of the activities, and then on top of that, oh, well, you're really good, so let's do more, that is likely not going to be the best option, because they are putting more force into the ground, because they are doing things at a much higher level. And so if I'm going to bound for distance, and I've got an elite triple jumper, and I've got kind of just an average sprinter, the average sprinter should be doing more than the elite triple jumper, because the average sprinter is putting less stress on their body in that bounding activity than the elite triple jumper is. And so there are some things to consider there when you think about the advanced level of the athletes, or you think about ways in which you can program to still get personalization, right, or individualization, while still being in a standard model. So.
Gotcha. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Chad. We really appreciate this expertise and the passion that all comes out. And so that's a fantastic mix. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Coach, for putting that email address up in case any of us want to reach out. And then just a quick reminder, don't forget to email me your mailing address and t-shirt size, and I'll get those out to you. But Chad, one more time, thank you very much.
You bet. Landon, to you and Hannah and the crew and putting this on, to offer a free resource like this to coaches is incredible. And so thank you for the investment into the sport, the investment into coaching, and helping us grow, and most importantly, helping us change the lives of our athletes. So excited to continue going. Seasons are starting soon. And so, yeah. So thank you, Landon. Thank you, Hannah.
Good stuff. Thank you, Coach. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Appreciate you, Chad. Thank you.
You bet.